Imagine a world where every decision you make, every action you take, and every choice you choose is measured not by what benefits you, not by what others expect of you, but by a universal law of morality, something that applies equally to all human beings at all times, in all places. This is the world that Immanuel Kant, one of the most influential philosophers in history, envisioned when he spoke of morality, reason, and the categorical imperative. Kant's philosophy can feel intimidating at first glance, wrapped in dense language and complex reasoning, but at its core, it's about something profoundly human, the desire to live in a world where justice, fairness, and respect for others are not optional, but essential. Today, we dive into this timeless question: what is Kant's categorical imperative, why does it matter, and how can it shape the way we live in an age of confusion, moral compromise, and endless temptation? Immanuel Kant was born in 1724 in Königsberg, a small Prussian city. He lived his entire life there, never traveling far, never living extravagantly, and yet his ideas traveled across centuries and continents, reshaping philosophy forever. His life was simple, disciplined, almost like clockwork. Neighbors would say they could set their watches by Kant's daily walks, so regular were his habits. But behind this quiet existence was one of the most brilliant minds to ever wrestle with the deepest human questions. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to live morally? And how do we, as imperfect beings, rise above selfish desires to act in ways that are truly good? Kant's answer would come through his philosophy of reason and, most famously, his theory of the categorical imperative. To understand the categorical imperative, we first need to understand what Kant believed about morality. Unlike many who came before him, Kant didn't think morality could be grounded in religion alone, nor in mere tradition, nor in the pursuit of happiness. He thought morality had to be grounded in something universal and unshakable, something that didn't depend on culture, mood, or circumstance. For Kant, that grounding was reason itself. He believed that human beings are unique in that we are not only creatures of desire, like animals, but also creatures of reason, capable of stepping back from our instincts and asking, "Should I do this? Is this right?" We are capable of recognizing duty, and it is this ability that gives us dignity and moral worth. Kant drew a sharp distinction between acting out of inclination and acting out of duty. If you help someone because it makes you feel good, that may be kind, but it's not truly moral in Kant's sense. If you help someone because it is your duty to respect them as a fellow rational being, then you are acting morally. Morality, for Kant, isn't about what benefits us, but about what is right in itself. It's not about rewards or punishments, it's about respecting the moral law that reason reveals to us. This is where the idea of the categorical imperative enters. The term itself may sound abstract, but Kant's idea is straightforward once unpacked. An imperative is simply a command, a principle that tells us what we ought to do. Some imperatives are hypothetical, meaning they apply only if you want a certain outcome. For example, if you want to be healthy, you should exercise. If you want to pass your exam, you should study. These are hypothetical imperatives, tied to conditions. But morality, Kant argued, cannot be conditional. It cannot be based on what you want or don't want. True moral principles must be unconditional. They must apply to everyone, everywhere, no matter what. That's what Kant calls a categorical imperative. It's not if you want X, do Y. It's simply do Y, because it is right. A command that stands on its own, without exception. Kant offered several formulations of the categorical imperative, but the most famous and perhaps the most profound is this: act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. In other words, before you act, ask yourself, Could I will that everyone in the world acted this way? If the answer is yes, then your action is moral. If the answer is no, then you are making yourself an exception, treating your own desires as more important than universal fairness, and that is immoral. Imagine, for example, the act of lying. If you tell a lie to escape a difficult situation, it may help you in the moment. But could you will that everyone in the world lies whenever it benefits them? Of course not, because if everyone lied all the time, trust would collapse, communication would be meaningless, and society would fall apart. Therefore, lying is immoral. Truth-telling, even when difficult, is a moral duty. Another powerful formulation of the categorical imperative is this: act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always as an end and never merely as a means. This means that you must respect every individual as having intrinsic worth, not simply use them for your own goals. To use someone merely as a means is to treat them like an object, a tool, something to be exploited. To treat them as an end is to honor their dignity as a rational being. Think about manipulation, exploitation, or deceit. All of these treat others as mere means. By contrast, honesty, respect, and fairness treat others as ends. Kant's message here is revolutionary. Every human being, regardless of wealth, status, or power, has absolute worth, and morality requires us to recognize and honor that worth. This may sound idealistic, but Kant's philosophy has radical implications for the real world. Consider justice systems. If we use punishment merely to deter crime, we are treating criminals as means to the happiness of society. But if we punish because the criminal deserves it according to justice, we are treating them as rational beings responsible for their choices. Consider business. If you see your customers only as ways to make profit, you are treating them as means. If you respect their rights, their dignity, and their freedom, you are treating them as ends. Kant's framework challenges us to look beyond utility and self-interest to a higher standard of morality grounded in reason and respect. But Kant also understood that this moral law would not always be easy to follow. In fact, it often demands sacrifice. It requires us to resist the temptation of convenience, profit, or comfort when those things conflict with duty. For Kant, morality is not about being happy, but about being worthy of happiness. Happiness may or may not come, but moral worth is within our control. This is why Kant is often seen as austere, even stern. He insists that duty must come before inclination, that principle must come before desire. And yet, there is a kind of liberation in this. By living according to reason and universal principles, we free ourselves from the tyranny of impulses and external pressures. We become autonomous, self-governing in the truest sense. Kant's emphasis on autonomy was revolutionary. He believed that freedom is not doing whatever you want, freedom is obeying the moral law that you give to yourself through reason. When you follow desire blindly, you are a slave to impulses. When you follow reason, you are truly free. This vision of freedom has inspired countless movements for human rights, democracy, and dignity. It tells us that each person has the capacity and responsibility to govern themselves morally, and that no one has the right to treat others as disposable. Of course, Kant's philosophy is not without its critics. Some argue that the categorical imperative is too rigid, that it doesn't account for the complexity of real life. For example, if telling the truth could lead to someone's harm, is it still moral to refuse to lie? Kant would insist that lying is always wrong, but many find that conclusion troubling. Others argue that morality cannot be grounded in pure reason alone, that emotions like compassion and empathy also play a vital role. These critiques are important, but even critics recognize the power of Kant's vision, a morality that is universal, rational, and rooted in respect for human dignity. In today's world, Kant's ideas remain strikingly relevant. Think about technology and artificial intelligence. How should we design machines that interact with humans? Should they treat people as ends or as means? Think about politics. Should leaders act on principles that could be universalized, or should they bend the truth for expedience? Think about the environment. Could we will that everyone consume resources as recklessly as the richest nations do? If not, then our duty is clear: we must change our behavior. Kant's philosophy provides a compass in an age of moral confusion, reminding us that reason and respect must guide us if we are to live together with justice and dignity. The categorical imperative is not just a theory for scholars. It's a call to action for each of us. It asks us to pause before we act and consider, if everyone acted as I am about to, what kind of world would we live in? It asks us to respect the humanity of others, not treat them as tools for our goals. It asks us to live with integrity, to align our actions with principles that could hold universally. In a world of quick fixes, shortcuts, and moral compromises, Kant calls us back to a higher standard. Perhaps that is why Kant's philosophy continues to resonate across centuries. He reminds us that morality is not about convenience, not about pleasure, not about reward, but about principle. It is about standing firm in the face of temptation, acting with respect for all, and living in a way that we could wish to be universal. His life in Königsberg may have been quiet, but his ideas thunder across history, challenging us even today to rise above selfishness and live with reason and duty. So, what is Kant's categorical imperative? It is the voice of reason within us, commanding us to act only on principles that could hold for everyone, everywhere. It is the demand to treat every person as an end, never merely as a means. It is the moral law within, shining as brightly as the starry heavens above. It is, in the end, a call to live with dignity, freedom, and respect for ourselves, for others, and for the world we share. And in hearing that call, perhaps we, too, can change the world, not through power or wealth, but through the quiet, steady force of reason and morality.